Good morning. Are you ready to renew your minds? You see the title, Permission to Walk on Water? Well, we're going to delve into some things to uplift your faith, help your faith grow, manifest in living in God. And I got a few things that you probably never noticed before. Okay, so let's get right to it. Let's go to the book of Matthew. The book of Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 through 25. All right, let's go there. Matthew. Oh, let's see. Let's see. And I hope you all are having a blessed day. And thank you for joining me because I love to teach. I love to teach. I love to grow and learn. Let's see. Okay. All right. And it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. Okay, he's walking on the lake. Now, let me see. I'm going to stop right there. I had to remind myself. I'm going to start right there. Now, picture that. Picture it. He walked on the lake. The lake, the water presented a problem. Excuse me. It presented a problem. He walked on top of the problem. Are you catching this? He walked on top of the problem. He put the trouble under his feet. Now let's go to verse 26. And it says, when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. Okay. Now, even though, and this is posed to us also, even though they knew him, but they really didn't know of him. Are you catching where I'm coming from? They really didn't know of him. Oh, they knew about Jesus, just like me, some of us. We can know about Jesus, but do you really know him? Do you really know him? Because if they really knew him, they wouldn't have been taken by surprise. They wouldn't have been shocked. And granted, to see somebody walk out on water, and then it adds to the scariness of it is it's at night. And then they're thinking, well, we're seeing a ghost. This can't be real. And look, we had to put ourselves in that situation also. We would have been freaked out. I mean, come on, there's just no getting around that. We would have been freaked out. We definitely would have. You can't lie about that. We would have been freaked out. We would have been freaked out. But again, you had to know who you were dealing with. It is good, I'll put it this way, it's good to know who you're dealing with, especially when it's God himself. And I guess at that point, maybe they're thinking that they had God in a bubble and they wasn't expecting, something like that. But he showed them, I'm much more than that. I'm much more. I'm the creator. I created you. I created everything. I'm much more than that. So we have to bring him outside of the already preconceived bubble that we have him in. We really do. The majority of us right now have him in a preconceived box, bubble, whatever it may be. And he's much bigger than that. We have to expand our mindset on how we think about him. We really do. And again, the water itself, he walked on top of the water. The water and the wind, especially in that situation, being the water, he put that, it was troubling. It was scary to them. He put it under his feet. And this basically is the lesson for us, is when we have trouble, when the wind is boisterous, when we're being frightened out of our shoes, basically, remember, he's with us. He's that calming effect in the hurricane-type winds. And let's go to verse 28. Let's read on. Verse 28 says, "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." Tell me to come to you on the water. So Peter was making a request. But did you notice? Have you noticed that he was the only one? He was the only one who requested to come to him. He was the only one that, and I'm going to put it quite bluntly, that all of them were scared, but he was just a little less than the rest of them. Because really, if you think about it, the rest of them kind of took an attitude of, nah, I'm okay. I'm all right. I don't have to walk out there. I'm okay. I'm all right. You good. We good. We good. We good. We don't have to go out there. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And I'll get back to you on that also. Just a little, we're going to give a little more insight on that. Okay? But let's read 29 and 30. 29 says, "Come," he said, this is Jesus talking. "Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, and cried out, 'Lord, save me.'" Now, isn't that interesting? He was walking on water. A lot of people don't put enough emphasis on that. We speak of Jesus walking on water, but Peter walked on water. He actually walked on water. And not enough is said about that. But with me, when I come across this, I always zero in on that. He walked on water also. He walked on water, but, and he was, I say it this way also, he was able to walk on water because he concentrated on Jesus. He had his eye on Jesus. He had his thoughts on Jesus. What happened? What happened? Verse 30 says, "But when he saw the wind, he was afraid." At that moment, that's like the devil coming in there. Even though you got Jesus by the hand, you got him by the hand, he's got your hand, vice versa. And it's kind of like you cool, then all of a sudden the devil comes behind you and goes, boo, and you get scared. And you lose your concentration, you lose your focus, you forget who you're walking with. You forget who's in your presence. You forget that the one who's in your presence can shut down the enemy just like that. But all you have to do is refocus. Refocus on him. That's all you have to do. I know. Easier said than done. Because you're in the moment. This is why we, in those situations, in the moment, and what I say to you, I say back to myself. Because we should all be continuing to learn and grow, no matter how old you get, no matter how much you think you know it all. So like I said, what I say to you, I say right back to myself, okay? I have to apply this to myself. So when it comes to when it comes to these situations, it goes back to renewing your mind. It goes back to rethinking, refocusing, basically repackaging yourself, putting God first. Putting God first. So when these things do come up, I'm sorry, my finger itches right here. But when these things do come up, you're better prepared. You act upon things more quicker. Why? Because you realize that now he may shake you for that second or so, but then you shake it off and go like, okay, I know who I am in the Lord. I got this. He got me. We got this. I fear not. I fear not. And you just laugh at the devil. But he took his eyes off Jesus, and then he began to sink. Now notice the part also that needs to be taken note of is he didn't immediately just drop down, but he slowly began to sink. That's still the Lord in effect. It's still him in effect. You're walking on water. You took your eyes off Jesus. You're going through the trouble. And whatever that trouble may be, money, marriage, other relationships, whatever it may be, you're going through it. But when you focus your eyes on Jesus, you start to see some things open up for you. You're starting to see things healed, your body being healed, relationships being healed. But then when money coming in, but then when you take your eyes off Jesus, and then all of a sudden things start to pile up. Hurts and pains and strife and all this and all that start to add up because you took your eye off Jesus. Same situation here with Peter. He took his eyes off Jesus. He started to focus on the trouble. He started to focus on the trouble instead of being like Jesus and have that trouble be under his feet. He gave into the boo. He gave into the scare tactic, because that's what it is, the scare tactics. He gave into it and began to sink. He didn't immediately drop down, because by the grace of God, it was a slow downward. And I'm not going to go there yet. Not yet. So, if you notice, in the books of Mark, Luke, and John, they don't mention this about Peter. Have you ever noticed that? They don't mention this about Peter. Matter of fact, let's go there. Let's go to Mark 6:45. Mark 6:45. 45. Okay. It says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. Now, it doesn't say anything about Peter there in Mark. So Mark doesn't say anything about Peter. Let's go to John 6:15. Just to give you another example of this. John 6:15. And it says, Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake by Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Again, no mention of Peter from John. And in Luke, same thing, no mention at all. Now, I'm figuring, why is that? It's just human nature, it's just human factor. But what do you mean? Here's the thing, they're giving their accounts, okay, of what went on. Look at it this way. You got those men in there. The only one who was, again, they were all afraid, but the least afraid was Peter. Peter wanted to experience walking on water. Peter asked permission from Jesus to walk on the water. Now, you have to have some sort of courage, so to speak, to even attempt that. You're in a boat, so you have to step out of the boat and have enough faith to plant your feet on the water, and the faith being that you will not go straight into the water. So he had enough faith to do that. The others were like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm not going to do it." So that's why I totally believe why the other books don't mention that in the Gospels is because they themselves, John, Luke, and Mark, were afraid. And when you in a situation of you're afraid, you don't want to look too bad. Okay, that's just human emotion coming in. Even though they're taking that segment of writing the Gospels, it's that human emotion, that human element that comes in, whereas, God, golly, I really embarrassed myself. This is the first time I even thought about this situation, this aspect of it. Of I really embarrassed myself. You don't want to look that bad. You don't want really. You don't want to look that bad, and that's for anybody. You don't want to look that bad, and that's what that is. That's to me that's as simple as can be, straightforward. That's what it is. Okay. All right. So, and again, Peter, he asked for confirmation. And again, I have to scratch my finger there. So that boy itching. Anyway, he asked for confirmation. That's something, again, I never really focused on. I never thought about until recently. He asked for permission. And in some situations that we're going through some things, we want God to see a prayer through for us. Look at that as key. Asking for permission. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt, right? Ask for permission. And the main thing also about prayers is we got to be in His will. But, you know, you got to exhaust things. You got to try things in the realm of God, in the will of God. And I'm seeing this is one of those things. Ask Him. Remember the word says ask, seek, and knock. Ask permission. And again, don't let doubt and fear interfere. Don't let it interfere. Because that is truly a prayer breaker. It breaks prayers. So remember that. All right. So the word asks us to rejoice in situations and rejoice in all things. But I know it gets hard when it comes to situations of when you have fear right in front of you. That is something that's not going to happen overnight. Let's be honest, let's be real, because we've all had lives where we've learned things that we shouldn't learn, fears that we adhere to that we shouldn't. So therefore, we have to unlearn a lot of things. Again, renewing your mind. And we're going to have to be patient on that because God is patient with us. So we're going to have to be patient. Continue to work at these things every single day. Refocusing, reprogramming, repackaging. We have to repackage ourselves. Do things different. Do things in the will of God. Do things in the way of God. Are you getting what I'm saying? Okay. Now, so in conclusion, let's go to verse 31 of Matthew chapter 14. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 14. And let's conclude this on verse 31. It says, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Be it Peter, you of little faith. He said, why did you doubt? Why do we doubt? Again, it just goes back to what I was saying. We have to unlearn things. We have to get the garbage out of our system. We have to rebrand, repackage, rethink, renew our minds. in the will and ways of Jesus. When we can start to turn those things around, when we can start to master those emotions and be clear thinking and have our thoughts on Jesus, for him to lead the way, for him to make paths right for us, to make straight, then you'll see a tremendous change in your lives in all aspects. So again, renew your minds. Enough said.